His wife let them erase him without a word. Now he would show them the true price of silence. They thought he was expendable, a part of the machine, easily replaced. But Edgar Morel was the man who built the machine. Every financial artery, every encrypted protocol, every silent kill switch bore his design. And buried deep within the system, beneath legal fog and corporate arrogance, was a clause they'd forgotten, a trap no one remembered existed. No one but him. They wanted him gone. So he disappeared, but not into the shadows. He became the shadow, and shadows don't knock. Edgar Morel had always been the man behind the curtain. At 42, he'd spent a decade building the bones of the Equal Light Foundation, a beacon of modern philanthropy co-founded by his wife, Elizabeth, and her politically minded sister, Nina. But no press release bore his name. No camera ever turned toward him. He didn't mind. Not at first. He was the architect. The man who designed the machinery no one saw. The audit-proof financial routes, the layered donation funnels, the contingency funds that held them steady through 2 recessions. He spoke the language of numbers with monastic devotion, and in return, he asked for silence. No credit, no light, just the work. Today, the walls felt thinner. From the conference room's glass partition, Edgar watched Elizabeth field a glowing interview with an international news outlet. The journalist praised her new cross-border initiative. She smiled, radiant, gracious, and utterly alone in the spotlight. Edgar stood in the shadow of his own creation. When asked about the foundation's evolution, Elizabeth spoke of her vision, of Nina's tireless strategy. Edgar's name didn't surface. Not once. He waited for even a passing nod. Nothing. Later, in their silent, sterile kitchen, he brought it up with measured calm. "You never mentioned the team. Or me." She paused, pouring tea like she hadn't heard. It was a quick segment. He studied her face, polished, poised, unreadable. The same woman who, 10 years ago, whispered about justice under blankets, now stared past him like he was part of the wallpaper. And Nina? She hadn't said a word to him in over a month. No tension, just pure, surgical exclusion. At board meetings, she acted like his chair was unoccupied. He returned to his office that night, sat in the low light, and opened the fund's latest audit. Every line item was perfect. Every margin accounted for. But something deeper felt crooked. Something he couldn't balance with formulas. He reached into his bottom drawer and pulled out the original vision statement. 3 signatures on crisp, yellowing paper. His, Elizabeth's, Nina's. Truth, equity, transparency. He traced the words with his finger, feeling a tremor of disconnect. The document felt like an artifact from another life, one where ideals hadn't been weaponized into marketing. Outside, the city buzzed with Friday night noise. Inside, Edgar sat motionless, the glow from his desk lamp sharpening the shadows on the walls. For the first time in years, he wasn't content with the silence. For the first time, it felt like the silence was hiding something. And Edgar Morel had built this place to expose truths, not bury them. Something was cracking. He could feel it in the walls. The conference room was colder than usual. Edgar noticed it the moment he stepped inside. The light above flickered slightly, and the hum of the ventilation cut too cleanly through the silence. Only 3 people were present. Nina, seated with a smirk so tight it looked stapled to her face, and two legal advisors in charcoal suits. "No, Elizabeth. Mr. Morel," one of the lawyers said, not even waiting for him to sit. "We appreciate you coming on short notice." "I didn't have much choice," Edgar replied. Nina pushed a folder across the table, her fingers tapping the laminate. "Effective immediately, you're placed on administrative leave pending a review of financial discrepancies linked to several project allocations." Edgar stared at the folder. It sat there like a quiet verdict. "You're accusing me of fraud?" His voice didn't rise. It coiled. "Not yet," Nina said. "But things have come to our attention. Audits are sensitive. We need distance. Neutrality." Edgar glanced toward the empty chair beside her. "And Elizabeth? Where's your neutral partner?" She felt it was best to recuse herself. Nina answered, too quickly. It wasn't recusal. It was abandonment. He opened the folder. No real charges, just vague implications, protocol language, the sort of bureaucratic fog used to exile without confrontation. They weren't firing him. They were erasing him. He closed the folder. "You know I built the compliance systems you're now twisting against me. You made yourself indispensable. That was the mistake," Nina said, leaning back. "Systems evolve." He stood without asking to be dismissed. "This is a mistake," he said. "It's a transition," she corrected. "Security will escort you. Your things are already packed." 20 minutes later, his ID badge blinked red at the elevator. No beep. No access. Two interns watched him from the hallway, pretending not to. His office was already gutted, desk bare, files gone. A cardboard box with his name scrawled on it sat beside reception. Inside, a pen, a notebook, and one folder they missed, Civic X, partnership licensing. They hadn't even read it. He walked out without looking back. No one followed. No one spoke. The sunlight hit his face like a slap. At the curb, he paused beside his car, box in hand. The edges of reality bent slightly, as though the world had shifted to a different axis while he wasn't looking. Inside the car, he placed the folder on his lap and stared at the name. They'd thrown him out, but they hadn't checked the foundations. And Edgar Morel always double-locked the vault. The house was too quiet. Edgar stepped inside, carrying the box like a wounded limb. He set it on the hallway console, next to a vase of white lilies Elizabeth had placed there last weekend. They hadn't wilted yet. He had. He moved through the house like an intruder. His own keys still worked, but everything felt wrong. The dining chairs too aligned, the air too sterile. Even the silence seemed calculated. He went straight to the study, loosened his collar, and poured a generous glass of cheap bourbon from the decanter he kept for nights he hoped never came. This was one of them. He sat heavily at his desk. The room was a monument to order, books aligned by color, awards tucked into side shelves, and the same 3 photographs Elizabeth had insisted on framing years ago. The Foundation's first gala, their wedding in Prague, and a blurry shot of him helping to unload food boxes during a relief run. The only one where he wasn't in a suit. He sipped. The bourbon bit hard. Good. The Civic X file lay on top of the box like a forgotten relic. He opened it, fingers tracing familiar signatures. His, the CEO of Civic X, a notary stamp. The partnership agreement was old but legally sound. The critical line caught his eye. The platform and associated infrastructure shall remain under Morel's administrative authority unless formally transferred through notarized consent. He sat back. They hadn't transferred it. CivicX wasn't just a donation processor. It was the backbone of the foundation's financial routing. A digital artery through which every dollar passed before being redirected into campaigns, logistics, PR operations. Without it, they were just a brand. Without him, they were frozen. He pulled out his laptop, powered it up, and logged into the admin dashboard. Access still valid. Two-factor authentication pinged his phone. Code accepted. He was in. Transaction logs blinked to life. Live numbers. Active pipelines. Queued transfers. His cursor hovered over the master override switch. A single click could halt every transaction. Not delete. Not destroy. Just pause. Let the arteries clog. He didn't click. Not yet. Instead, he closed the laptop slowly and leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on the ceiling. They thought they'd erased him. But erasing a man like Edgar Morel meant knowing what he'd built, and they hadn't looked closely enough. He reached for the bourbon again and took another long drink, this time with no grimace. The pause had already begun, not in the system, but in him. The bar hadn't changed. Same crooked sign above the door, same burned-out bulbs, same sharp smell of beer-soaked wood and disappointment. Edgar walked in like a man stepping back into a memory he'd tried to erase. Lazare Shummer was already 2 whiskeys deep. The former legal counsel of the Equal Light Foundation looked thinner, more brittle around the eyes. His tie was off, collar unbuttoned, but the old sharpness was still there, somewhere beneath the exhaustion. "Didn't think you'd actually call," Lazare said, gesturing to the seat across from him. Edgar sat, keeping his coat on. "You owe me the truth," he said quietly. Lazare sighed and ordered another round before answering. "They're consolidating. Fast. Nina's moving pieces I didn't even know were still on the board. You weren't just a liability, Ed. You were an obstacle. Obstacle to what?" "To the restructure," Lazare muttered. "They're planning a massive foreign donor pipeline through a partner NGO based in Tallinn. It's all being masked as cross-border efficiency, but they're laundering control. You built too many hard locks. Too many double approvals. She needed you gone." Edgar didn't blink. "Elizabeth signed off?" Lazare paused, then looked away. She didn't stop it. Silence settled like sediment in the glass between them. "And CivicX?" Edgar pressed. Lazare hesitated, then pulled a battered phone from his pocket. "Nina's been trying to pull admin access through the back channel. But CivicX is holding. She's offering bonuses. Even threatened one of their regional partners." Edgar's jaw tightened. "She doesn't understand how it was built. She thinks you're irrelevant. But," Lazare added, lowering his voice, "if she finds a crack, she'll take it." The bartender dropped off the next round. Edgar barely noticed. His mind had already moved ahead, diagramming moves, preempting reactions, isolating fault lines. "What do you want from me?" Lazare asked, more warily now. "Nothing," Edgar said. "You already gave me enough." He stood and dropped a few bills on the table. At the door, Lazare called after him. "Edgar, if you're planning something, just don't start a fire you don't want to finish." Edgar didn't answer. Outside, the night air bit at his skin, crisp and real. He opened his phone and scrolled through old contacts until he found the one he needed, a CivicX infrastructure lead he'd mentored years ago. He sent a message, "We need to talk," quietly, because now it wasn't just about being pushed out. It was about understanding the depth of the rot. And Edgar Morel was done being silent. Edgar closed the door to his study and locked it behind him. Not that anyone would interrupt. Elizabeth hadn't returned in 2 days. The house remained museum still. No movement, no sound, just the steady hum of something unraveling. He opened his laptop, fingers steady, eyes cold. CivicX's interface blinked to life with familiar efficiency. His login still worked. His fingerprint unlocked administrator mode. He navigated to the root dashboard, the beating heart of the Foundation's digital operations. Each transaction, every donor pipeline, real-time flowcharts of millions moving through virtual veins. He hovered the cursor over the toggle labeled Transaction Routing, Manual Override. One click. That's all it would take to jam the system. Not destroy it. Not erase. Just pause the entire financial rhythm of the Equal Light Foundation. Like holding your breath before a dive. His phone vibrated. A text from a CivicX backend engineer. Nina requested code injection access. Denied it. She's pushing hard. So she knew he still had control. She just didn't know how deeply it ran. He didn't reply. Instead, he accessed the queue. 7-figure donations pending transfer to logistical partners. Most of them shells, vague addresses, no transparency. The Tallinn NGO Lazare mentioned appeared twice, both flagged internally months ago for irregularities. Edgar had filed warnings. They'd been buried. He clicked the override. Every transaction shifted to pending admin review. The flow froze. In less than 15 minutes, the effects would ripple through departments. Delays, error messages, phone calls from frantic program managers. But no alerts would lead back to him. His access didn't trigger system flags. He designed it that way. Quiet. Invisible. Absolute. He leaned back. Let them sweat. Let them realize that the man they erased still had his hand on the master valve. He spent the next hour scrubbing through logs, pulling backup files, downloading key data sets onto an encrypted drive. Not sabotage, just insurance. By the time he shut the laptop, the Foundation's entire cash flow had hit a silent wall. No press release. No public scandal. Just a subtle internal seizure. Edgar walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and watched the trees outside sway under a darkening sky. The wind was picking up. Storm clouds gathering. The doorbell rang. He didn't move. Another buzz. More insistent this time. He finally opened the door. No one there. Just a large envelope on the welcome mat. Unmarked, sealed in black. He bent down, picked it up. Inside, a printed summary of his override. No sender. No threats. Just one sentence handwritten at the bottom. You blinked first. Edgar stood frozen. Somebody knew. And now the lever wasn't phantom anymore. It had been noticed. By morning, the first fractures began to show. A message thread from internal coordinators leaked. Panic chatter about frozen funds, and signed approvals, and unexplained override conditions. Edgar watched it all unfold from the glow of his monitor, eyes scanning every line like a surgeon watching vitals. They still didn't know it was him. But the panic had weight now. Real inertia. Delays spread like rot. He opened an encrypted workspace and created a new account at Undershadow. No names, no identifiers, just a black background and a title across the header. The Other Side of Truth. Within an hour, he uploaded the first document, a financial cross-map showing diverted funds labeled as educational campaigns rerouted to offshore subcontracts. Clean data, no commentary. Then came internal memos, mildly redacted, with digital signatures intact. One, signed by Nina, authorized a payment to a logistics firm that hadn't delivered a single unit of aid in 9 months. The post caught fire. It spread across watchdog channels, activist networks, and independent journalists. No wild accusations, just proof, in their own words. The second post came by nightfall. Expense reports detailing a retreat in Lisbon labeled Program Development, attended by exactly 3 executives, none of whom worked in field operations. Then came a DM. From AD. I know it's you. Meet me. I have more. He stared at the initials. It had to be Ada Diaz, the field coordinator who left 6 months ago without explanation. She had handled the refugee program, the only department Edgar hadn't needed to audit. He agreed. Cautiously. They met in an empty parking garage beneath an abandoned office block. Neutral, forgotten space. She wore a hoodie pulled low and carried a small USB drive. I kept everything, she said without preamble. Photos, spreadsheets, voice memos, the grant money we never saw, the pressure to falsify impact reports. I couldn't be part of it. He nodded. Why now? Because when I saw the CivicX freeze, I knew someone had finally cut the cord. And no one else would be smart or crazy enough to do that but you. He took the drive. What do you want in return? She looked up, eyes sharp. Just let the truth land. All of it. Not just enough to settle a score. Edgar hesitated, then offered a rare, quiet reply. I wasn't planning to settle. Back home, he reviewed her files. There it was, the full anatomy of decay. Empty warehouses listed as supply centers. Clients signed with forged metrics. PR reports scripted before programs even launched. The truth wasn't a sword. It was a slow, precise scalpel. And Edgar Morel had just made the first incision. It was just past midnight when the knock came. 3 sharp raps. Precise, not tentative. Edgar closed the file on his screen, heart ticking louder than the laptop fan. He moved to the front window, careful not to step into the spill of light. Through the curtain, her silhouette. Elizabeth. She stood perfectly still, hair down, no coat, holding 2 coffee cups like they were some fragile peace offering. He waited a moment, then opened the door. Cool air rushed in. Hi, she said softly. Her voice was cracked glass. He stepped aside wordlessly. She entered like a guest in her own home. The silence inside the house pressed in around them. She walked to the kitchen without asking and set the coffees down on the counter. 1 black, 1 with cream, his usual. I thought you might still be up, she said. Edgar didn't answer. He watched her with clinical stillness, studying every movement. No makeup, eyes tired, hands trembling just enough to betray her. I know you're angry, she said, finally facing him. But I didn't want it to happen this way. This way, Edgar echoed, his voice low. What way was planned? Elizabeth's throat tightened. Nina, she pushed for it. Said you were blocking progress. That CivicX was outdated, that you. "We're in the way," he finished for her. "She said you'd understand. That we'd talk after." I I didn't know she'd do it like that." "You didn't stop her." The room went still. A gust of wind rattled the kitchen window, but neither moved. "I was scared," she admitted. "Of the fallout. Of being seen as weak. I thought, if I stayed silent, it would pass." "It didn't." She nodded, eyes glassy now. "You were always better at seeing the long game." He stepped forward, just once. Close enough that she felt the shift in air between them. "You were there when we signed that founding charter," he said. "You knew what this was supposed to be." Elizabeth lowered her gaze. "I did." "And now?" he asked. She didn't respond. He walked past her, opened the door, and held it. Elizabeth didn't move for a long time. Then, slowly, she picked up her untouched coffee, walked to the door, and paused. "I still believe in what we started," she whispered. "Then stop standing next to the people who buried it," Edgar said. She left without looking back. As the door shut, Edgar leaned against it, exhaling the tension from his chest. Not in relief, in realization. She wasn't lost. She had chosen a side. And now, so had he. It began with a whisper. A message arrived through a proxy channel Edgar had set up weeks ago. "Nina has a meeting tonight. Off record. With someone from Civic X. Location, Frederick Street Club. Private room, second floor. No security." It came from Lazare. No pleasantries. Just coordinates. Edgar responded with a single word. Received. He made 2 calls. The first to Malik, an old cybersecurity contact who owed him a favor. The second to a technician with a talent for installing things people never noticed until it was too late. By 7:30 p.m., a discrete audio node was embedded behind a decorative wall sconce in the meeting room. Wireless, encrypted, and feeding directly into Edgar's phone. At 8:04, the door opened. Nina entered first. She looked sharp, composed, shark eyes in a silk blazer. A man followed, mid-30s, Civic X lapel pin, uncomfortable. They ordered wine. Then came the pitch. "We need to override Morel's access," Nina said plainly. "You know he's frozen everything. And your board doesn't want that kind of exposure." The man hesitated. "We can't act without cause. He still holds original signatory rights." Nina leaned forward. Her voice dropped, but the recorder caught every syllable. "Then fabricate one. Leak a security flaw. Claim breach of protocol. We'll handle the rest." He went quiet. Edgar imagined the color draining from the man's face. Nina added, almost offhandedly, "If you cooperate, your regional team will get exclusive rights to manage the transition. Think long-term value." Silence. Then the man said, "This conversation never happened." She smiled. Of course it didn't. By midnight, the audio file was clipped, anonymized, and sent to 3 trusted journalists via the other side of truth. By dawn, it was everywhere. Leaked audio reveals plot to illegally seized digital infrastructure of major foundation. Civic X declines comment as internal ethics committee launches investigation. Nina vanished from public view. The Equal Light Foundation's official statement called the audio unauthorized, potentially doctored. But the damage was real. 3 partners pulled out within hours. Civic X suspended all high-level access privileges pending audit. Systems stalled. Elizabeth didn't comment. Edgar didn't gloat. Instead, he sat in his kitchen, sipping tea, the morning light soft across his face. He had no interest in revenge headlines. This was about precision. Cut the current. Starve the machine. Let the truth speak in their own voices. Then let the world hear it unfiltered. The inbox was flooding. Dozens of messages, then hundreds. Some from journalists, some anonymous, others from former colleagues who had suddenly remembered his name. Edgar ignored most of them. He wasn't ready, not yet. The fire was burning on its own, and his silence had done enough damage. But silence had limits. It no longer protected him, no longer protected the truth. He knew it when he read the subject line of an email from A. Mason. When you're ready to speak, let's talk. Alec Mason had once been a firebrand investigative journalist. He was older now, exiled from mainstream media, but sharper than ever. And, most importantly, he didn't deal in theatrics. He dealt in precision. They met in an old bookstore-turned-cafe in a quiet district downtown. Rain tapped at the windows. No recording devices visible. Alec kept his notepad in hand, but didn't open it until Edgar gave the nod. "I'm not interested in smearing," Edgar said. "This isn't revenge porn." "Understood," Alec replied. "You want facts. Narrative follows data." So Edgar spoke. He spoke of the numbers, of the redirected grants, of the supply chains that only existed on paper, of the reports falsified before programs even launched. He described the architecture, the financial routing, the ethical firewalls, the intent behind the code. He didn't mention Elizabeth by name, but her absence hung in the air like the shadow of a knife. Alec listened like a surgeon. No interruptions, no performative gasps. Just quiet nods and fast handwriting. By the end, his notepad was filled. He closed it gently. "They'll come for you," he said. "I'm counting on it," Edgar replied. The article went live under the headline, "The Man Behind the Mask: How One Architect Froze a Philanthropic Empire." It didn't just trend. It detonated. Suddenly, the story wasn't about a frozen system. It was about who had the power to stop it and why he chose to. Former volunteers began posting their own experiences. Unanswered emails, sudden program closures, unexplained budget shifts. One thread, from a field medic in Guatemala, went viral. He was the only one who ever asked what we needed. Everyone else just wanted pictures. The board of the Equal Light Foundation released a frantic video statement. Too late. The silence that had protected them, protected her, was no longer a barrier. Now, silence was evidence. Edgar sat in his study, lights low, scrolling through the avalanche of responses. His name was trending. He didn't smile. Instead, he opened his notebook and wrote just 4 words. "Now they're listening." Finally, they didn't fall all at once. They splintered, board members first. 3 resigned quietly overnight. 2 issued public apologies, thinly veiled with legal language. Donors followed. The German foundation pulled out with a single sentence. "Pending independent review, all financial support is suspended." Then came the headlines. Equal Light imploding? Whistleblower architect or saboteur? Foundation under fire as internal systems freeze. Inside the Equal Light Foundation, operations slowed to a crawl. Programs stalled. Communications froze. PR releases went unanswered. Phone lines rang into silence. Panic slithered into every department. Half the field staff didn't show up. Those who did only asked one question: "What's happening?" And no one had an answer. CivicX made their move next. In a terse public statement, they declared all licenses under internal review, citing concerns regarding governance inconsistencies and data access violations. Every transaction now required dual verification, and Edgar Morel's name was still on the list. Active, validated, irreplaceable. Without his sign-off, nothing moved. The machine had seized. But Edgar wasn't watching from a distance anymore. He was building. He registered a new platform under a provisional NGO license, Voice of the Unseen. Stripped down, transparent, and open source. No marketing team. No executive board. Just verified initiatives, donor-led choices, and audit trails visible to everyone. No faces. No names. The first projects launched in under 72 hours, an independent vaccine logistics team in Nairobi, a refugee legal aid group in Thessaloniki, a volunteer-run school in Chiapas. Real teams, real needs, directly funded. By the fifth day, his platform had more small donors than Equal Light had retained after its collapse began. No press, no PR, only trust. Elizabeth hadn't spoken publicly. She hadn't returned home. Edgar imagined her sitting in one of those sterile boardrooms, watching everything crumble, her silence now louder than any speech she could have made. He didn't contact her. He didn't need to. His war wasn't against her. It was against what she'd allowed to take root. On the sixth day, the foundation filed for internal restructuring, corporate code for surrender. Edgar stood on his balcony, the city lights flickering beneath a bruised sky. The air smelled like rain and endings. Inside, his laptop pinged. New request, Guatemala medical shipment, funded. New donor, anonymous, recurring. New volunteer application, approved. No logos. No ceremony. Just quiet, competent rebuilding. Collapse wasn't destruction. It was space. And Edgar Morel had always known how to design from the ruins. The ocean was quieter than he remembered. Edgar sat on a weathered bench overlooking the shoreline, wind tousling his collar, a stainless steel thermos steaming at his side. He'd rented a small house by the cliffs. No staff, no meetings, no traces of his former life. Just a laptop, a notepad, and silence that didn't demand explanation. He hadn't looked at the news in 3 days. Voice of the Unseen was running. Projects continued, donations came in. Volunteers self-managed. And the code, clean, efficient, anonymous, was doing its job. He didn't need to interfere. That was the point. A car approached along the gravel path. It stopped idling. A woman stepped out, wind whipping her coat. Ada Diaz. She carried a canvas bag and wore no makeup, no fear, just purpose. "You don't answer emails," she said as she approached. "I answer the ones that ask the right questions," Edgar replied, standing. She handed him a USB drive. Translations, reports, photos, field updates. "And why bring them in person?" "Because I want in," she said. "I don't want to work for something anymore. I want to build something. With someone who doesn't lie when the cameras roll." They stood in silence. Then he gestured to the bench. She sat beside him. No contracts. No titles. Just trust. As waves crashed below, Edgar opened his notebook and wrote a single line. "Victory doesn't taste sweet when you've lost your appetite." He looked at Ada. "I didn't want to destroy it. I know. I wanted to protect what it was supposed to be." She nodded. "Now you can." But you can't do it alone. He closed the notebook, sealing the thought inside. Back at the house, he made 2 mugs of strong black coffee and placed one by Ada's seat. They worked in silence for hours, mapping grant logistics and vetting partner networks. It wasn't glamorous. It was real. Later that night, Edgar stepped outside. The moon hung low over the water, and for the first time in months, he didn't feel hunted. He felt hollow. Yes, but hollow like a cleared space. Like something could grow there. He understood now. This wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. Of purpose. Of values. Of silence that meant focus, not fear. And though victory had come, it brought no applause. Only responsibility. And maybe, if he was careful, something better than peace. Clarity. The lake was still. Edgar sat beneath a sloping pine tree, a battered laptop balanced on his knees, thermos resting in the grass beside him. No Wi-Fi, no signal. Just offline reports syncing quietly in the background, ready for upload when the connection returned. He wasn't hiding. He was choosing where to be seen. The dashboard for Voice of the Unseen showed 128 active projects across 17 countries. Microdonations fueled schools, clinics, and legal teams. Each line of code traced back to him, yet no one knew. No press conferences. No founder's letter. No name at the bottom of the homepage. That was the design. A system without a face. A platform without ego. He opened a blank document and began typing. It wasn't a report. Not a manifesto. Just a letter, to be sent under a pseudonym to a small journal that published thought pieces on philanthropy and digital ethics. Charity, he wrote, should not require stage lights. It should require diligence. What we built once was real, until we sold its integrity for applause. This new structure has no stage, no audience, just shadow and accountability. That is where impact lives. In silence. In action. He signed it, ex umbra, from the shadows, and hit save. He didn't look up when footsteps approached. Ada sat beside him, stretching out her legs, watching the lake ripple. They asked again today, she said. Who? Donors. Press. Volunteers. They want to know who's behind it all. Edgar smiled, faint and unbothered. Tell them the truth. Ada raised an eyebrow. There is no one behind it. Just a system. A mirror. They sat in silence, watching ducks skim across the water. The light shifted. Somewhere in the trees, a hawk called out and vanished. Inside the laptop, the sync completed. New donors joined. A project funded in full. A new region on board. No one saw it happen. No one clapped. But something moved. Edgar closed the laptop and leaned back against the tree. The world didn't need another name at the top. It needed hands in the dark. Quiet minds. Systems built to endure, not impress. He didn't win. He remained. And in remaining, he built something unkillable. Not a monument. A shadow fund. In the end, it wasn't revenge that defined him. Not even justice. It was clarity. Edgar Morel had spent years speaking in the language of numbers, quietly holding the architecture of other people's legacies. He thought love meant staying silent. That loyalty meant staying invisible. But betrayal has a way of illuminating everything. Not with fire, but with frost. It freezes the world until only the unbreakable remains. He didn't return to the shadows. He built from them. He never raised his voice, never struck back. He simply let the system collapse under the weight of its own deception. And when the dust settled, it wasn't his name that echoed. It was the integrity he'd preserved in silence, now spoken through action. Some foundations are built on names. Others are built on truth. And truth, once freed, never needs to be loud. It just needs to be unshakable.